Hola, everyone. Welcome to Latinas on the Table, presented by We Are Girl Latina. And indeed, for those of you who are unfamiliar with We Are Girl Latina, we are 100% Latina-owned and operated community-driven platform that provides Latinas and Femme Latinas access to resources and connections for professional and personal growth. My name is Vanessa Santos. My pronouns are she, her, and I am the co-CEO and partner for We Are Girl, and I will be your hostess today. And of course, we encourage you to share your favorite moments or tips by using the hashtag Indeed Latinas on the Table and tagging We Are Girl Latina for reposts and our partner at Indeed Works on Instagram to share the love. Thank you so much for choosing to be here with us to observe Latina Equal Pay Day, which this year is observed on December 8th. We Are Girl Latina is leading the efforts of bringing attention to the wage gap that still exists for Latinas and working towards closing that wage gap one Latina at a time. A few stats that I want to bring top of mind for you and why we're here to have this important conversation. Latinas working full-time year-round and part-time earn only 54 cents for every dollar earned by white non-Hispanic men. And Latinas who work full-time year-round only earn 57 cents to the dollar, meaning that Latina women must work nearly 2 years to earn what white non-Hispanic men earn in 1 year. Latinas lose more than $1.2 million in a lifetime, and we would need to work until nearly 90 years old just to make the same amount that a white man earned by the age of 60. And this is according to the National Women's Law Center. This is why we need to break the mold and not only have a seat at the table, but own the damn thing too. So who here is ready to own the table? I hope you are, because I'm very excited and honored to introduce our keynote speaker, Daniela Pierre Bravo. Besides being a true powerhouse, she's a best-selling author and MSNBC reporter for Morning Joe. Her work has been featured on The Today Show, CBS Mornings, Telemundo, Forbes, Cosmopolitan, Refinery 29, y más, y más, y más. Daniela, thank you so much for being here. We're so honored, and the floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Vanessa. You know I love collaborating with you, and I feel fired up about this day. On one end, you know, our progress has fallen behind. While there has been a lot of efforts this year on equal pay, on salary transparency, Latinas, out of all women of color, were the farthest behind. But at the same time, grateful to have this space and to have this conversation that is so needed. And, you know, I think a lot about equal pay. I've written about it. I've reported on it. I wrote a book called The Other, How to Own Your Power at Work as a Woman of Color. And, you know, there's a lot of equal pay that we can't control, right? There's the biases, the prejudice that exists in hiring and negotiations that we know well, the lack of salary transparency, and the fact that there's really not a lot of us at the top to make those financial decisions. And I wrote this book, The Other, because I knew what it felt like to be the other and to be in total loss of control of my environment. So first of all, I hate the title, which I've said this many times, but I decided to keep it because it's that feeling of being the other that has connected us. And it is so important as I've thought about, you know, the spaces that we take up at work. And as you know, you've mentioned owning the table. It's not just about being at the table, but it's owning the table. And when we have been conditioned to feel like the other in this country, which by the way happens well before the workplace, we are conditioned to look to gatekeepers for approval, admission, and it changes the way we show up at work. And so my sense of otherness, which I talk about in the book, is I grew up in a small town in Ohio, undocumented. I was the oldest of 5, and I was in the shadows. So for a long time, I dealt with a lot of shame and sort of not being able to come to terms fully of the power of my identity and being Latina. And that really caught up with me as I started coming up the ladder. Assimilation was sort of the key to success, right? Following the rules, waiting for permission, appeasing, accommodating. I went to college and paid everything in cash because I couldn't get any government loans or scholarships. I don't know if there are any DACA recipients here, but if you know a DACA recipient, if you are a DACA recipient, you know the sense of total loss of control before we had DACA. And the uncertainty that sort of swirled around us, and the anxiety and the stress that was constantly around us. I, like many other DACA recipients, managed to go to college and sort of had to find our own playbook on how to do that. I remember the summer before graduating, I had a big idea of wanting to work in media, and I lived in a small town where there was mostly white people, hardly any immigrants, básicamente no Latinos, and it made me feel like I wasn't represented. And so I knew the power of being represented in the media, the narratives that were told about us, right? Because a lot of the narratives that I heard in my small town were very disparaging towards immigrants, and it was based on fear. But it took me a long time to understand that it was based on fear. And so one of the reasons why I think, keeping the title The Other is so powerful is because by understanding why and how we've identified as the other, it allows us to challenge and dismantle why we believed we were the other in the first place, right? And if you go all the way back on a memory, on a scenario, on a traumatizing experience where it was, no doubt that you were the other, that stuff stays with us, but we never challenged the root of it, which is based on fear and limiting understanding. And so when we don't have that community around us, depending on how you grew up, we internalize that. And there's a lot of shame there. And so for me, I thought that my psychological safety was really at the hands of gatekeepers who didn't look like me. And I needed to kind of get rid of my identity, or at least subdue it, right? I for the longest time, I didn't wear hoops to work because I didn't want to appear too Latina, because I was afraid, and I knew well the stereotypes that people had of Latinas, right? That if we were too direct or if we were too passionate, we would be seen as aggressive and hysterical. And I actually, one of the first places I interviewed at, I ended up then talking to, there was 3 people that interviewed me, one person I spoke to, and years later, we had a conversation, and, they said, you almost didn't get hired because, you were seen as too aggressive, too intense, right? And they were afraid if you were going to get along with everybody else at the company. So we know those stereotypes very well, and we've lived those stereotypes very well. So anyways, I go to college, right? And I'm in this place of uncertainty. I don't know what's next. I have this big lofty idea of working in media, but I don't have a work permit. I'm still undocumented. I'm still paying for college with cash under my mattress. I had like 4 side jobs during college. And I realized at the time I was in Ohio, I went to a school called Miami University. I don't know if anybody knows that university, but it's in Oxford, Ohio. And I knew that if I wanted to be around people that I could learn from, because at that point, that's all I wanted. I just wanted to be around people that I could become a sponge around and just learn from. And I knew that was going to happen in New York City. I didn't know how, I didn't know when, right? I had never gone to New York City, but I knew that I wanted to be around that diversity and other Latinos. And I did a little white lie on my resume. I said that I lived in New York City instead of Ohio, because as someone who has felt the repercussions of stereotypes and being boxed in, I knew that the hiring manager was going to have some sort of excuse if they saw the resume of somebody who lived in the middle of nowhere in Ohio, who had to be there like in 2 weeks to start the unpaid internship that was unpaid, right? So that's why I did that little lie. I put like a little address. I think I did Columbia University dorms. Anyways, I'm studying for an exam, and I get this phone call from a 212 number, and I'm freaking out because I applied to literally everywhere and anywhere in New York City that I could find that were hiring unpaid interns. And I get a call back, and it's the hiring manager for Diddy's company, P. Diddy, Sean Combs. I don't know what age demographics are here, so I just I know he's gone through so many names, but he had at the time a little known marketing agency that marketed all of his brands. And they call me up, and we have this screening interview, and they said, "Great, we see that you're local. Can you come in for an interview tomorrow?" And I'm like still in the cornfields in the middle of Ohio, and I'm like, "Yes, I will be there tomorrow." I just totally pretending that I was in New York. And I get off the phone, I immediately panic because I don't have an ID, I don't have a driver's license, I can't just get on a plane, I can't even drive to New York, right? I hadn't even talked to my mom about this because I knew even the people in our own community don't understand us sometimes. And that's really hard to come to terms with because it's just a new world of work that our moms and abuelas sometimes didn't go through. And so I ended up getting on an 18-hour bus, 9 stops along the way, and into stinky, smelly Port Authority. I clean up and change that day, and I run and make it down to where the interview is taking place. And I get there and I tell the hiring manager, you know, I don't actually live here. I didn't hop off a subway. I just got off an overnight bus from Ohio. They looked at me like I was totally crazy, and they go, you know, we could have done this over Skype. And do you know this internship is unpaid? But I just wanted to let them know how excited I was to be there and to just be a sponge, because at the time that was really the only thing available to me, right? As someone being undocumented, this was before DACA, right? So I didn't even know that DACA existed or was going to exist. And, you know, I write about this story in the first book that I wrote with Nika Brzezinski, which is for all women, not just women of color. And it felt so icky telling this story, and it kind of still does, because it's really all of our stories. There is absolutely nothing unique about my story, because it is the hustle, passion, and grit of all of the Latinas in my community. And, you know, while I worked really hard and, you know, I did my own playbook because I didn't have any mentors or anybody to kind of pass on my resume. I had to find out a lot of things on my own. And because I was on my own, it felt really lonely. And because it was lonely, I internalized a lot of the things when I didn't have the support system of people that looked like me, that had my lived experiences, that knew that, you know, it was okay to be who you are. And you know, there's a lot of talk in the workplace today about coming to work as your full self. Well, a lot of us have left behind parts of our identities to get access in the first place. And half of the work, right, to advocate for ourselves better is picking up the fragmented pieces of our identity that we have left along the way for psychological safety, for belonging, for inclusion, for some sort of sense of equity, and to feel like you are at the same level as anybody else, right? That you are entitled and you deserve the opportunities as everybody else, right? And so back to that summer, I just love telling the story because, you know, there's something about this DACA community and the community of Latinas and immigrants that I don't know if what your mom's told you, but my mom's motto was una cosa a la vez. And oftentimes we never had that kind of, if you do this, then this will happen, because there were so many uncertainties along the way. My mom worked 2 and 3 jobs. She wasn't college educated in the United States. And oftentimes we didn't know what was going to come next. But I remember that summer where I was in New York in that unpaid internship, sitting in my cubicle and getting a text message from my family member. And if anybody knows, June 2012 was when DACA came out. And I remember panicking because there was no TVs in that office, and running to a little deli on the corner and seeing this little tiny TV where President Obama was delivering the address on executive action for people in our situation. And I get emotional every time I think about this, because in that moment, it wasn't just an executive action that was going to give us a work permit, which, by the way, changed almost a million of us' lives, but it gave us a sense of belonging and that outright confirmation that we were enough, right? That we did belong. But that was just the start of it. And it's been 10 years. And to this day, there still has not been long-term legislation to codify DACA. So we're constantly living in the shadows. Living in uncertainty. And that experience of being a DACA recipient and that experience of being undocumented gave me the sense of otherness of treading lightly, which if you're not a DACA recipient and you're not a first-gen immigrant, you have probably experienced as a Latina in corporate America, right? That if we defer from these unspoken rules of inclusion that have given us access in the first place, that these opportunities that feel fleeting, right, that feel like they weren't generationally available, are all on our shoulders. And if we mess up and if we say the wrong thing, and if we cause dissonance with our identity and the things that we say, and if we raise our hand in a meeting and say the wrong thing or say something that other people don't agree with or don't understand with, then our whole, our whole value in that company could be taken away, because that is sort of the fleetingness that we have come to understand generationally because of the opportunities that did not exist for a lot of us who have felt like the other. And so the reason why I wrote this book is because, first of all, as I mentioned, I want to really get into the origin of the other and the fallacy that we ourselves, by the way, believed for safety. And putting that in context can be so powerful in taking back power, right? Because as I moved along in my career, getting in the door was just the first step. And Vanessa, you said it perfectly, it's not enough to be at the table. We have to own it. And what nobody told me was that the rules that got us in the first place, put your head down, do the work, somebody will notice, right? Because our moms and abuelas, that's what worked for them, right? It's not going to work for us, right? The being overly grateful is great. I think gratefulness is a great quality. Humility is a great quality. But the problem that I've experienced, and it is what I talk about with a lot of the women who are starting out, who are in middle career, who are in C-suite executive levels, right? That are not just Latinas, but women of color, is that they have unconsciously led with that feeling of gratefulness. And what that looks like in a negotiating setting is that you are afraid to fully ask for what you deserve because you're afraid that you're going to be seen ungrateful, right? And so all of these micro nuances, interactions that we unconsciously do at work in order to mute our identity has repercussions when we get to the negotiating table. And in the book, I explain why, right? Because bringing your full self to work and your Latinidad and your identity to work in whatever setting and whatever industry that you work in is so important, right? One, from the leadership perspective, right? It is good for the bottom line, right? The US is only becoming more diverse. Generation Z is the most diverse generation out there. And so if you work for any company where the client base is the United States, right? The demographic of the United States, we need your identity. We need your ideas, right? Because it's good for business. And I think for me, one of the things that I also find so important is the conditioning that we've allowed ourselves to believe about the way we ask and expect money, right? So one part of it is articulating the ask, right? And we all know, bring data to the table, right? Make sure that you know your market rate, all that stuff, right? All the basics, we know how to go in there and negotiate. But the expectation of money, right, is different. Because for a lot of us, again, the Latina equal pay gap exists because Latinas are overrepresented in low wage jobs and underrepresented in C-suite and leadership positions in the very roles that have control of how much money is allotted to us. So that's really important to understand that expectation of how much value we expect for ourselves, and not to be afraid that if you ask for more, you're going to be seen as ungrateful, right? Especially if you've done the work to get there. Mentors and sponsors are so important, but I kind of want people to redefine how we see mentors and sponsors, right? Sponsors are somebody who we totally need, right? There are people that are going to advocate for you when you're not in the room. They're going to be people who give you opportunities for exposure And mentors are somebody that is just going to guide you along the way, but are not necessarily going to put their name out there so that you can have opportunities. And so knowing those dynamics is really important. The other thing is to understand how to use mentors and sponsors. I recently had a conversation with a woman in tech who was a C-suite executive, and she said something really interesting to me, which is, nobody told her that part of the value that she brought into the company was not just based on the KPIs, was not just based on the baseline performance review, but it was based on how closely she could connect herself to the P&L, right? To the profit and loss. And one of the very strategic ways that she utilized mentors and sponsors was to gain intel on the sort of goals and initiatives from a company perspective, from a high level, right? On what those bottom line initiatives and goals were, so that when you're positioning yourself for a negotiation, you're not just meeting that, baseline criteria, that baseline performance metrics. You are bringing something else to the table, deeply correlated to the bottom line, to the profit and loss part of the company. And that is how people start seeing you as a leader, right? That we so desperately need so much of our community to be a part of. And so I just want to leave you with this because I know I'm running out of time. I could keep talking about this, but I also needed that in my own career. So I'm a reporter for MSNBC's Morning Joe, and I'm a contributor to NBCnews.com. And I didn't know when I was going from a production role to a booking editorial role that I could contribute in a different way than I was doing, right? Because I remember when I was a booking producer and there were stories on immigration or stories that were about our community, Latinos, to be totally honest with you, when I started, it was really hard for me to raise my hand and advocate for them. And it still hurts for me to acknowledge that, because that takes me acknowledging that I have in some place deeply internalized shame about who I was and who I am. Because for so long, I tried to make this part of my identity disappear, right? This shame I had about being undocumented. And so when my career really took a pivot, right, from not just being a booking producer, but pivoting to a reporter where I'm actually telling the stories of our community, right, was when I truly became confident, proud, and had a total sense of self that was deeply connected to my roots, to my Latinidad. And to know that it's not just about my career growth, right? Because there's a part of me that performs better by being connected to that, because I can tell those stories in a way that my white colleagues cannot, right? But it's also that we are an inflection point at a very pivotal moment where we can really change things. And if you have a seat at the table and you have a voice for the people that are not represented in that room, there is a responsibility that we all have to vocalize who we are and the things that are important to our community, because it's not just about us, but it's about everybody else, all those voices in our communities that we bring along with us when we do have a seat at the table. So I know that's a lot. And this idea of, or this reality of unequal pay for Latinas has so many different nuances, and it's very complex. Start what you can control. Start with yourself. And Vanessa, I know we've had a lot of conversations about this, but that's really the future of owning our power, is owning our identity.
100% it is. And I love and appreciate it. And we so appreciate your vulnerability and honesty, because it really does take a lot of courage to also admit where we haven't truly risen to expand for others. And that's why we're so grateful that you're here. And what you said about owning the change and being the change really reminds me of something special someone really dear to me said to me Today actually was about the difference of being a thermometer versus a thermostat. A thermometer, you go into an environments that aren't even really created for you, and you try to adjust yourself and probably minimize yourself to fit that cadence, as opposed to being the thermostat and adjusting the environment so that it works for you, or you showing up as expansive as you need to be so that people know who you are, wearing your hoops, being expansive, demanding that pay raise. So just grateful for you and grateful for your time and sharing your wisdom. I wish you can see the chat comments because I know you're pinned and you probably don't see it. But it's the love that you're getting. I hope you're feeling it, because thank you. Thank you. Thank you. It's just amazing. Amazing. So thank you for sharing your magic. And I'm just excited to spotlight all the other incredible HIPAAs that are here, that are trailblazers, that are thought leaders, that are economy builders. And that is the importance here, is that we're helping to build socio and economic power through these conversations so that we can eradicate this wage gap. So it is my pleasure to introduce Cindy Lone, founder of Latinas at Work, Andrea Lopez, Senior Learning Operations Partner and Unidos IRG, co-chair at Indeed, Mabel Frias, CEO and co-founder of Luna Magic, Patricia Mota, President and CEO of ACE, Sonia Smith-Kang, founder and designer of Mixed Up Clothing. Thank you to each one of you. And again, this panel is not about me, so I'm going to minimize myself quickly because I want y'all to have ownership at this table, and just start by asking each one of you, how did you get here? Your quick 3-minute introduction story, and I'll kick it off with you, Cindy.
I'm Cindy. I'm the founder of Latinas at Work. I'm a success coach. I'm so happy to be here, so excited to be in this room. I'm focused really on building a community to help more Latinas and women of color reach their next level of success. And we do that through mentorship, mindset, and resources. And so it's just so exciting to have this conversation. Latinas at Work, and really the work I do as a coach, is focused on, similar to We All Grow, creating a safe space to really help you shift into your power, into your abundance, and into your success. So I've had over 20 years of a successful career in corporate America, focused both, in various areas: finance, operations, management, strategy, and now HR. And really growing up as a first generation Latina with parents who moved to the US from Guatemala. They actually moved to New York and all over the country. But I grew up in a household that really honored hard work. And it's really because of that hard work that I'm here today in this virtual room or at this table. And so I just really want to take a moment, here to be in gratitude for those that came before us, for the struggle that our ancestors, our parents, our grandparents had to get really all the way here, and all that hard work that has also brought all of us here in union, both, our ancestors and our own. And hopefully also we can highlight a lot of the work that some of those behind us are doing too, some of that great work. Thank you, Vanessa.
Oh, thank you so much, Cindy. Appreciate you so much. I will kick it off to my compatriota, my Dominicana, Mabel Frias, because we are so excited to have you here as well. Tell us a little bit about you and how you got here.
Mucho gusto estar aquí. Hi, everyone. Good morning or afternoon, or wherever you are. Mabel Frias, co-founder and CEO of Luna Magic. We provide high-quality cosmetics at great prices. From an identity perspective, I consider myself Afro-Latina or Black Latina. A very interesting conversation. And how did I get here? I have over 15 years of corporate experience within the retail luxury sector. And I think one of the greatest things that happened to me in my career was just, being really grateful, but also being very bullish about understanding the market dynamics around pay, coming to the table with my research, my data points, and also my understanding of knowing, that I was very specialized in what I did. So took all those experiences working for other people, big companies like Nordstrom, Savage X Fenty, Macy's, all the things, and then fueling all that expertise into, launching and scaling our company.
Beautiful. Muchas gracias, Mabel. Okay, Patricia Mota, my energy just immediately went to you.
Hello. Thank you, Vanessa, and to your co-CEO, Ana Flores, for the invitation to join you all. We're grateful for the partnership with We All Grow with ACE. I am proud Latina. I'm proud Mexican American, proud first generation college graduate, and professional. Proud of being immigrants. And these are some of the components of my identity that have shaped my story along the way and my why. My professional background spans from co-founding a nonprofit, working in government, community affairs, corporate marketing for a utilities company, to higher education, to getting back to nonprofit at ASCE in 2010 after earning my graduate degree in public administration, where I started as a director, focused on our Mujeres de ASCE, which is our women's leadership program, was able to revamp and scale that program from solely being in Chicago to now having over 3,000 alum across 135 cities, 7 countries, to leading our corporate partnerships and serving as president and CEO since 2015. And most recently with 2 other co-founders, Olga Camargo, Juan Carlos Avila, launching Shenex, which is a fintech geared to close the gap for Latinas and help build wealth. I grew up in a household where traditional cultural norms existed. A lot of the beautiful values that we shared, such as humility, modesty, family, yet where traditional gender roles were also well defined. And I currently serve today as an advocate for access and equity, and I have the honor to lead in this role that helps me fulfill my personal mission to close resource gaps, access gaps, and there must be equitable solutions to truly close those gaps. And at ASCE, our mission being to positively impact workplaces by cultivating the pipeline of Latino talent, providing our community the insight, access, and support to be successful in their career. As a student, I experienced gaps, and fast forward in my professional career, when it came to my first promotional opportunity, and after interviews with the committee, it was decided that I was not fit for the promotion. First, I thought, okay, let me see if I can get some feedback on what are the things that I need to improve on. And when I met with the only woman from the committee, she thought she was doing me a favor by sharing that it had nothing to do with my capabilities, that the committee was more comfortable with the other candidate being a white male. That was my first experience where blatantly facing discrimination due to race and gender. And I've heard this story with many other Latinas. I know many of us here in this room have had those personal experiences. And those are only a few examples of the many ways that our community, Latinas, have had access to less resources, or are being put behind and not being offered that next opportunity or pay. And while we all can't control our environment, at ASCE, we help Latinas focus on what was discussed earlier, on what you can control. That is the ASCE program, where it's a women's leadership program geared to help women thrive personally and professionally, where to date we've been able to help 70% get promoted within less than a year, 100% satisfaction. And so I am excited to continue the dialogue, and thank you again for the invitation.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Patricia. And I just want to let everybody know, I don't know if y'all noticed, but most of us are wearing our Págame tee. And by wearing this t-shirt and purchasing, you'll be supporting the amplification of Latina women's equal pay day and acknowledging the pay gap. And profits of the Págame tee will be donated to ASCE, the Hispanic Alliance for Career Advancement. So thank you all that have purchased, and I hope you continue to do so. And you can at carlaandco.com/weallgrow. Sonia, your beautiful face and your beautiful hair. Tell us about you.
Hi, thank you so much for having me. I'm so excited to join you from Los Angeles. So I'd like to acknowledge my presence on the ancestral and unceded territory of the Tongva people. So to answer your question, how I got here, I just love that question. It takes me back to this young Sonia, a 12-year-old girl riding a school bus with kids who didn't look like me, to a school with kids who didn't look like me. I identify as Afro-Latina. My parents were in the service, so I'm a proud military brat, and what is also called a third culture kid. I was born in Puerto Rico. Then my family was stationed on the Hawaiian island of Oahu before coming to the mainland of California. When I came to LA, you can imagine it was culture shock. Think blonde hair, feathered hair, blue eyes to my brunette, 3C curlies, brown eyes and skin. Let's just say I didn't fit in. I went on to university. I earned a bachelor's degree in nursing, and I worked as a critical care registered nurse. I was moving and grooving in my field. I got married to my husband, who is Korean American, And as we started having kids, they were multicultural, multiracial, multilingual. It was important to acknowledge this and be really intentional with how we would raise them. So Richard and I got together, like having a business plan for your company. My husband and I made a family plan. We discussed the life that we were going to lead. We were going to teach them English, Spanish, and Korean. They were going to go to diverse schools, similar to the way that you child-proof your home to protect kids from injury. We culture-proofed our home to protect their identity. So that meant we brought in products, books, food, music, toys, dolls, you name it, that look like our kids. We celebrated Korean holidays. We wore traditional hanboks. During Latine special occasions, there were guayaberas, vibrant dresses. So there was this sense of overwhelming pride that we felt during those occasions that I wanted to emulate, because those were temporary and by occasion. So I asked myself, what could I do for my children and to give them something every day? So what's a mom of 4, an RN, and a problem solver to do? I added more to my to-do list. And I went out and I created the world I wanted to see, right? So I got to work. I had learned how to sew in 7th grade, and my mom sewed. So I sourced fabrics from all over the world, think sombreros, arepas, piñas, calaveras, mud cloth, kente cloth, you got it. So I turned them into fun everyday stuff for my kids. So people stopped me on the street. They were asking about the clothes, and I realized they were conversation starters. So folks would open up about their culture, and we'd start having these exchanges. And after a while, I started taking orders. I was doing pop-ups at farmers markets, at my hospital's little store. And my husband was like, "What are you doing?" And I said, in true Latina style, who didn't just stick her toe in the shallow end of a pool, I just jumped all in. And I started Mixed Up Clothing, which is my elevator pitch. It's a purpose-driven children's wear brand and apparel company with designs through a multicultural lens. In the first year of the business, I was on the Today Show. Then I went on The Real, NPR, Latina Magazine. And this year I launched in 3 large retailers, Amazon, Belk, and as of April 1st, Macy's. And I'm working on my 4th, so it is to be announced. But I am so honored to be here with everyone, and happy to answer any questions y'all have. Thank you.
Thank you, Sonia. I have to admit, and I know this probably resonated with people, when you say culture proof, I felt that. And so many of us have felt that. And the interesting thing is that so many of us have done so without knowing and being able to name it. So I hope we can all borrow that and think of you when we show up authentically as our full selves. So thank you, Sonia. Andrea, please tell us a little bit about you and how you got here.
Hi, everyone. My name is Andrea Lopez. I'm so excited to be here today. I'm a senior learning operations partner and a co-chair for our Unidos IRG at Indeed. I mainly focus on helping our employees know how we help them learn and grow. I'm also Colombian, first generation, and like you've heard from many people speaking today and in the chat, I come from a world where I'm constantly being told to, just be grateful, keep your head down, play it safe. And going back to my college days, at the time, I'd been really interested and still am in this intersection of human capital and technology. And I took somewhat of a risk and decided to create this individualized major in college because I felt like, nothing really matched my interest. And that led me to an internship at Indeed. And thankfully, after my internship, I was offered a full-time role in client success. But even though I really wanted to focus on, transforming workplace cultures and developing talent and leveraging these really cool new tools in HR. But at the time, I listened to that play it safe voice in my head. And even though I, knew that I wanted to pursue that at some time, but kept hearing that, that voice. Thankfully, I got exposed to a lot more diverse voices at Indeed, especially in our IRG. And I decided it was time to rock the boat. I was like, let's do this. I sought out new mentors, learning experiences, and really just was driving to prepare for a new path in our within our employee development team. And thankfully I did that. I took that leap, and that led me to work up to the role that I'm in now. And I truly love that within my role in HR and in our Unidos IRG. I love that I get to help others really see how they can thrive within that like growth mindset, instead of really focusing on this imposter syndrome that we often hear so often of. So I'm really excited to be here today among, so many powerful Latinas. I'm grateful we're all here to develop ourselves and really continue to drive that change. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, Andrea, and thank you all for being here. This is why we're together owning the table and continue to open doors so that others can also open the table and unlock the professional potential. So now we're going to get into some very specific questions so that we can help our amigas here on how to develop themselves, have these hard conversations when it comes to asking for a raise, to help eradicate the wage gap, and to also consider some pivots. So Mabel, you're incredibly interesting because you've spent over 13 years in various high-level corporate roles, executing strategy for some of the most iconic brands. And then you made the leap to entrepreneurship, and you have credited that to the experience that you picked up in corporate to help you build one of the fastest growing cosmetics companies. So can you walk us through the key tips that you've leveraged to pivot in your career?
The key tip for me was always authenticity and standing in my worth. It was really that simple. I think I had some really good mentors. Every job and every company, I took the job because of the manager, never the job itself. And I was always very transparent with each manager around my expectations. I was always very clear around, hey, I know that I'm good at what I do, but what kind of manager are you? What does success look like to you? How do you handle setbacks, right? I was always interviewing the individual and then making sure that they had a sense of sureness or understanding with the kind of direct report that I was. That plus data. I'm a very data person. I mean, we're very fortunate that we live in a society now that there's a lot of, Glassdoor.com, or there's a lot more. There's definitely not as much transparency, but there's definitely more than when my parents were coming up trying to kind of find the next deal. So I would say that, but for me, it was just being honest. And that honesty came from being really honest with myself about what I liked and what I didn't like, being honest with every job. What am I learning here? It was really more purpose driven in that way. So to make that more tactical, you have to spend a lot of time with yourself. I think the challenge with us being first generation, anything going to college, is that we get really good training on how to navigate in another world, but then we lose the insights of ourselves. And I think that you can be like a high powered executive, but if you don't know who you are, you don't know what you stand for outside of what you're trained to do, it's really difficult to then come show up in the room authentically as yourself and to ask for what you want. Many times I remember when I was like negotiating, they're like, well, you're in the middle ground with everyone else. And I said, yeah, but I'm not everyone else. I am myself. I'm not speaking to you to talk about my increase in relation to my team members. I'm speaking in relation to myself. Right. So part of this interviewing these people is making sure that they also have their own courage to stand up for what's right, but also holding them accountable through touch bases. Like I always understood that relationship building was everything. Like I always understood, and I don't think women of color, we do this enough. I am my own cheerleader. I will tell you all the great, this whole like put your head down and then hoping that everybody sees you. The problem with that is everyone is thinking about their own problems, their own challenges, their own divorces, their own careers, right? So you have to be not afraid you're not coming off as vanidosa or boastful. You're just stating the facts. Like, hey, did you know that last week I did XYZ and it was a 36 lift to the company? Like, hey, you know what I mean? Or if that was too cumbersome for that type of manager, what I would do is during my touch bases, I held them accountable to quarterly, right? I see my life in quarters. Every 90 days, we're going to talk about, let's set some goals. Do we agree? Does success look like to both of us? And kind of like having an ongoing conversation. And again, being very clear. I remember any job I went in, I had my own roadmap. I said, well, my personal lifestyle philosophy, I would tell them, is in my expectation is in 2 years, right? I will either get promoted or I will seek an opportunity somewhere else. And, you know, and I said it in a joking manner, like, you know, he, but my expectation, I would be like, you know, I would love to grow with a company, 20 years, but let's be honest about the facts of where the job market is, right? I would just bring it back to the facts and the market. Like, I would just treat it like a business, because it is. Our careers are business. I think we're very fortunate if we can find alignment between business and passion, which is why I love the ride that I'm on right now. But even now within my own business, a family-owned business, I treat my sister in the same way. We're doing business together, 9 to 5. This is about purpose. This is about, we have employees. This is about holding everybody accountable, because if we're all accountable to each other, there's no greater feeling than winning. And when you're honest about, I'm very honest about trophies. I like winning. I like feeling good. I like being a purpose, you know, and there's nothing wrong with that, especially as women Latinas.
Oh my God. I mic drop in so many key areas. I feel like the audience along with me, I was just like, I'm going to give myself whiplash. You literally just preached on so many things that are the first thing that really stood out to me is choose your boss as opposed to choosing the environment, right? Choosing the person, because your boss is really going to help guide you and take you to that next level. Really going to want to care and invest. Something else you also said is trying to find a way to marriage, to a harmony between your passion and making money from it, because those intersections can be very cumbersome. But then the most important thing that you said is showing up for yourself and being full of yourself. And there's nothing to be ashamed at that. It's interesting when you look at the ways that girls are raised versus boys. The boys are like, you're so strong, you're so this, and the girls like, you're so pretty, and everything is an emphasis on the exterior as about the interior. And then that is why we have this gap that we need to face. And so collectively, and part of being here and owning the table juntas is for us to give ourselves that love, to give each other the flowers, to own and be full of ourselves. Mabel, I am so moved and inspired by you right now. Thank you so much for dropping those gems, because I know that the audience was like, preach.
Yep.
Thank you so much. And okay, I'm moving on to Patricia. Okay, Patricia, you have publicly shared about your eye-opening experiences regarding career opportunity gaps and why negotiation is an important factor in not leaving money on the table, which is something that's uncomfortable for so many of us, is talking about money. What negotiation tips or skills do you recommend that our audience hone in on so they can financially advance and close the current 54-cent gap that Latinas make per dollar?
Thank you, Vanessa. And yes, great tips that Mabel just shared. And even Daniela and yourself, right? In terms of really talking about the importance of advocating for ourselves. I cannot reinforce or emphasize enough is the importance of really embracing our Latinidad, right? The beautiful values, traditional values that we may have, whether it's humility, modesty, but understanding when is it that we need to shift, not change who you are, but make the jump to saying, this is a time and a situation where I need to assert myself, and getting comfortable with that over time. 3 key things that I would share that are also components of that we take a deeper dive in our Mujeres de Asset program, specifically the negotiation and influence session. And I know we have some alum that are joining us here. So if you haven't, please let's give a shout out to our Mujeres de Asset alumni that are joining us today. But 3 key things. One is ensuring that you're doing your research. I think it's critical to understand the marketplace, the industry that you're in, because it varies across the board in terms of whether industry standards, whether it's different criteria for different levels. And part of doing the research, I know some of the resources that were shared, such as Glassdoor, for example, Salary.com. And I know many of you all have resources, so feel free to share and drop yours on the chat, because I know this is a place of sharing and resources with one another. And understanding that not just online research, but leveraging your circles, whether it's the We All Grow Amigas network, the Mujeres Asset, the Asset network, other Latinas in Tech, for example, all of these amazing organizations that have resources and connected folks that are willing to talk to you about this, and know what are the range and what you should be asking for. And sometimes, to Mabel's point, it may mean you're going to a different employer, right? And you have to do what's best for you at the end of the day. Secondly, I think it's so critical, and I'm a firm believer of culturally relevant programs, resources that really provide that equity, such as We All Grow, right? It's critical to find these types of resources that are catering to you, right? So continue to lean into these types of networks and understand the importance that it has. I mean, we've had so many successful Latinas that go through our programs, and when they're going through Mujeres de Asset for the first time, realize that they've been subduing their Latinidad. For the first time, realize that they've been underpaid. For the first time, and it's like you have 2 degrees, maybe graduate degrees, and it's not until we got into the safe space that we were able to really have that self-awareness that then helps catapult and get you to that next level. And thirdly and lastly, you know, nothing happens overnight. How do you continue practicing advocating for yourself, right? Daniela said this earlier. For me, earlier on in my career, it was uncomfortable raising my hand in meetings or speaking up or advocating for others, but it was like a muscle. I had to practice over time and project myself so that over time it gets easier and easier. Never 100% comfortable, like even with speaking engagements, right? We all still get those little nerves, but it's being comfortable and saying, I'm doing this for a greater purpose, not only for myself, but who we represent, right? We talked about generations past, we talked about the responsibility that we have to pay it forward. And so that's why I'm here. That's what I do. And I think when I keep that in mind, it gives me that much more courage, that power to ask, to advocate, to speak up. And so whatever that is for you, really lean into that.
Patricia, lean into that, which is so important, because you're right. Sometimes it is unnerving for us to have dialogues about money. The only reason why I knew there was a specific role at a company, I was making $54,500. My male colleagues were making $75,000, same job, and I probably had a lot more expertise. And the only reason I said nothing is because I was so grateful to just have the job. And if it wasn't for another woman of color who said to me, hey, Vanessa, just letting you know, I think you're getting underpaid because you saw my pay stub. It's having those open dialogues and being in safe spaces like our Amigas community. You know, we are getting into so many deep things that if we run out of time for Q&A, I want to remind everyone, we can continue the conversation on amigas, amigas.weallgrowlatina.com, so that this is where we continue to have and share with one another so we can support each other and continue to build our socioeconomic power. Patricia, muchas gracias. Andrea, on to you. As our resident Indeed specialist, there's so many incredible tools and resources available on Indeed.com that can actually help our communities and Latinas set themselves up to ace their interviews and build their resumes with ease, which we know sometimes that's like, oh my God, do I build a resume for each job? What is the flow and process about that? Can you share some tools that our audience can engage with as they go out and search for that next level job so that we can continue to get more and ask for more?
Yeah, absolutely. I think before I dive in, I really recommend go into exploring all of these tools as an agent of your job experience. Like really prioritize your needs, prioritize the value that you want in getting your next job. I think from a tactical perspective, I have a lot of recommendations. Thankfully at Indeed, we really put the job seeker first. But I would really recommend starting with our company pages. So research and explore all potential employers ahead of applying. You can see things such as company reviews, most importantly, salaries. And within those reviews, something I want to just call out is that we partner with an organization called Fairy Godboss. They provide reviews and feedback around women's ratings specifically. So really providing details on like how women are being treated and different recommendation scores. Like I mentioned, you can see all of the average salaries per job title for interview prep. There's a whole tab where you can find insights on how to really navigate different interviews at those specific companies, just because, you know, different companies have different quirks or tips. So find all of those right within that company page tab. From it separately, so you have that like research the company. But then when you think about like yourself and your resume, like Vanessa, you mentioned, like, do you change your resume for every single company? I think it depends on what you're looking for, but just remember that there's a huge value in all of your skills, and then they're super transferable. So Indeed has a extremely affordable resume review option, but let's say if that's not feasible for you, there's an entire library of resources for career advice that include a lot of great practices for tips. For your resume. I also think when it comes to equal pay, it really starts with awareness. So you really need to get familiar, not with just that company, but think industry. You need to be aware of what a company values. So at Indeed and some other organizations, they specifically talk about how they do pay equity studies. So if that's something, you should try to align yourself with organizations like that if you have that type of opportunity. So take a look at that. And then when it comes to landing the job, try hiring events. Sometimes, I know people, you may not be comfortable with interviewing. It may give you some anxiety. I know it gives, even just public speaking, I'm definitely a little nervous today. But I want to make sure if you want some practice, like you definitely can schedule interviews or leverage hiring events, like all right from your home, which is nice. And that kind of helps you learn how to answer those interview questions and summarize your experience, your value that you have to bring. So I hope those are some great tips, but when in doubt, just summarize it in the, company pages, work on your resume. You have so many transferable skills. We are all super resilient, have that shown in your resume, and then, get practicing for your, your next interview to get that next job.
Thank you, Andrea. I had no idea that that was even a service. That would have been so helpful early in my career if I knew that I can have someone kind of help me with my interview and those interview skills, because sometimes if I do it with my mom or my tia, they think everything I do is fabulous. And so they're not my target audience. And then I love what Mabel said earlier about interviewing the person, because it takes a little pressure off of you, because you also want to make sure that you're a good match. So thank you, Andrea, for sharing those tools and tips. And please, everybody, go to Indeed.com to make sure that you can leverage all of these beautiful tools that have some cost to them, but most of them are free. And it's like, why not continue to upskill when you can? Next question is to Cindy. Okay, Cindy, you have extensive experience at building operational processes in helping organizations and employees be more productive. Productivity, however, can get a bad rap because it implies that we must always be busy. We must always look productive. And sometimes that leads to burnout. I've been there, I have experienced it. And so, but I know that there are other ways in order to find this happy place where you can be productive without the cost of your mental health. But with that being said, there's so many Latinas and amigas in this conversation that are also looking to get to that next level of growth. So what advice can you give to those that are looking to make the leap into a management or executive role to support them in unlocking that next level without compromising their mental health?
Yeah, Vanessa, I mean, I agree. Productivity does get a really bad rap, and burnout is a real thing. So, particularly in our culture, both like professionally and personally, it's always go, 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 right? As Latinas, I know as I was growing up, I couldn't sit down without being asked to go wash the dishes or do laundry or just constantly be on the move, and really in that like hustle mode. And so, this idea of la vida no es fácil, or life is not easy. You have to work hard to succeed. I think that's a lot. That is just something I've been working on personally, and I work on with my clients to really unlearn. And, I actually have a little story here. I remember my first job. Every day I would call my mom, and that's kind of a theme here today too, but I would call her at the end of the day to just chit chat about what was going on at work. And she would always end the call like saying, "I'm praying that you always have more work. I'm praying that you get more work." And, it was interesting because for her and for a lot of our parents and our past generations, work means security, financial safety, like being able to pay the bills. And so it's really this idea of like survival mode. And unfortunately, they had to do it. And super grateful. I'm privileged to be here today because of all of their hard work. But at the same time, it took me a few years of working to kind of have that light bulb moment when I was like, "Hey, mom, actually, can you change your prayer? Like, pídele a Dios que tengamos menos trabajo y más dinero. Like, can you please ask God for less work and more money, please?" That was really the prayer that I was asking for. Right, because I think it's a bit of like a reframing. And it was in that moment of self-awareness that I started to shift my mindset. And a lot of what I think productivity is about shifting. And so it's important to keep in mind, to answer your question, that especially as you get more experience in your work, in your career, in your life, you're going to have more things going on. And you can't really have any success if you don't have your health, mental health included, right? So no matter the role, the job, the reward, none of it can really be possible without you. So you, your ideas, your energy, that's really the biggest asset. And that's what you should be prioritizing. So what I tell a lot of women, Latinas that come to me, focus on that next level, is prioritize your energy, your mental health. So one example may be scheduling. Like literally look at your calendar, and usually I do a full audit of your time, but really being able to hone in on the things that drive you, that bring you energy, that light you up, and schedule those in. So that might look different for everyone. It will look different. Some people need a spa day, others need meditation. I know I'm a heavy journaler. So whatever it is that brings you energy, and it could be, chatting with your mom for a few minutes, making sure that you build that into your schedule, similar to the work meeting, the appointment, the drop off, whatever it is that you have, the full gamut of responsibilities that you have on your plate. I know I have all of those and more. Being able to just schedule it and make it a part of your day to day so that you can have that fuel to keep going and keep doing all the things you have to do. But it's really focusing on the things that you want to do, even if it's a little bit, right? Maybe you can't spend all day journaling or meditating or at a spa day, but it could be taking 5 minutes before you start anything else, before the day wakes up, to say, I'm going to focus on reading this chapter, this one page, because I really enjoy reading. So just really providing those tools and resources and making sure that you can go in and focus on it every day. And that's really what Latinas at Work does. That's why I created it, was to help provide those tools and resources to help you move out of survival mode and into thriving mode, because that's where you want to be. That's where you're going to be at your optimal. That's where you'll be able to create more. Like it'll feel like, wow, I just worked 8 hours. And it's because you're filling up your day and your life with the things that bring you more energy.
Yes. And it's an energy shift for sure, because the more you give to yourself, the more you love yourself, naturally your confidence will be raised, because you're like, I can go for that higher title. I can go ask for more money. But if you're in a position of consistent thriving or consistent giving to everyone else before you give to yourself, then you're always going to put yourself last, even in these situations. So it's subconsciously, you have to train yourself to go from survival to thriving. So thank you, Cindy. Moving on to Sonia. Okay, as a social impact and multicultural activist entrepreneur, and now with coining the term of culture, I'm going to use that going forward. You advocate for diversity and inclusion across the corporate and entrepreneurial landscape. What advice can you give our attendees who sometimes feel like they don't belong to carve a space for themselves in their professional endeavors, especially when sometimes they are the only one?
Yeah, I live for this stuff. I eat, breathe. This is like my life. I serve as vice president of a nonprofit organization that advocates for multiracial and multicultural community. So this is all I pretty much talk about. But first off, I just want to say that when I hear things like that, I just want to acknowledge that you are heard. I felt exactly the same way. And before I realized who I was and the power that comes from that. So believe me when I say that you belong. When I came to LA, I lived with my grandparents on what was basically a rancho, but no zoning permits. Okay, so we had, hens, roosters, geese. We grew fruit. We had corn stalks in our front yard. And, we listened to array, corridos, and, we cooked our own food in the front and backyard. My mom sewed my clothes. It saddens me that what was once an embarrassment was really such a beautiful gift my family and now my ancestors gave me. These are stories that need to be told. There's a special spirit, a truth in our lived experiences that need to be shared. There's beauty in owning who you are and understanding that although we may not have all started on the same plane or starting point, the experiences that we have are yours. And for that reason, just for that, you belong. And so we have a perspective, and I don't want folks to shed who they are. Bring her with you. Bring that girl from Pacoima who thought she wasn't enough. Bring her with you into every experience, because you are enough simply by being you.
Okay, as our resident culture proofer, thank you for that, because it's so important, and so many of our environments are not going to reflect what we see and what we've lived. And many times we are the first. So many of us have to be the first. And so I love that you said, bring her with you. Bring those experiences with you. Bring your ancestors, bring it with you, because that's fuerza, that's poder. And that's what we need so that we can continue to own the table. So before we get into Q&A, if we hopefully have some time, vamos a ver, I want to ask this question to each of you, and whoever wants to jump in, please feel free. Why is it so important for Latinas to not only have a seat at the table, but to own the table? ¿Quién quiere comenzar?
I can start. I think when I saw this question, I immediately thought about ownership and agency. I think owning the table, implies that we have agency to be deciding what does change look like and what does progress look like, and really revolutionize the spaces and the places that we're taking up. We're doing this in some sort of capacities, like Latinas are doubling their college attendance, especially in the last decade. But it means that we're entering these spaces where we haven't really been before. And that's a revolutionary act. And we need to command the space that we're in really for the first time. And also having a seat doesn't mean you're being heard. We have to acknowledge that while we have an opportunity to now be heard at these tables, the conversation's not always led by us. And so our voices aren't prioritized. We need to, continue to strive to be conversation leaders, encourage others with different views to actually open up as well, because we know that for many times we haven't been invited to share our different perspective. And that, I think, is really what opens the door for these more intersectional voices to be heard. And so I think that, instead of creating this new echo chamber that already exists now, like, how can we lead the charge by owning the table and opening the door for those different voices to be heard?
Thank you, Andrea.
Mabel,
there's something that I'm like, you got it. I'm picking it up.
You can tell, right? Que tú comes que adivinas, eh? For me, it's more about, you have to be mindful of what table you're trying to influence, meaning certain there's, and your personality trait. What do I mean by that? My friends who stayed in corporate, they have the personality trait of slow and steady wins a race, and they can go in circles for the next 25 years, and they're okay with that because for them, incremental change is better than none whatsoever. Mabel Frias is more like, I want change now. I want it fast. I want things. I want to do 700 different things. So then I knew that at some point I had to be an entrepreneur to create a new table, because the exhaustion of going in circles and changing human mind and behavior is just, it's a hustle within itself. It's a talent to sit there and go in circles for 25 years. It's a superpower, in fact. It's just not mine. So I decided to create my own table and then invite other people to my table who are interested, because I know that my customer base, I know them really well. I also know that I am, and my team, we have this insight that, sometimes I think the challenge that we have as people of color is like, the world is what it is, and it's built, and it takes a while for things to kind of move. We have to have a lot of courage to, flip it. Okay, I create the table, now you come in, and then how do I negotiate shared value, right? Because at the end of the day, when you're dealing with other people outside of your own culture, the way that they quantify progress is, data analytics and value. So I just think it's just, when creating the table, influencing a table, or taking the charge from an existing table, it's a personal conversation with yourself to know which game you're going to win. And regardless, it's because we're Latinas and we are malleable and hardworking and genuine, we have really strong cultural values, you're going to win. It's just about how you want to win.
Thank you, Mabel.
A lot of the tables that are out there, they need us.
Correct.
They need us. And I think it's critical that we understand the data that we represent. I understand, because we're Latina, that doesn't mean we know that we will represent 1 in 3 of every woman in the US by 2060. that Andrea mentioned, that in the past decade, 100% more Latinas have earned college degrees, that Latinas are opening businesses 6 times faster than any other group in the US. And we are making the majority of household financial decisions, meaning we own the 1.8 trillion purchasing power that we as a Hispanic Latinx community represent. We own and we lead the 2.8 GDP that this community represents, meaning if this Hispanic Latinx Latina community were a country, it would be the 5th largest. And so I think it's imperative that we're using that data when we're advocating for ourselves to have a seat at certain tables, because yes, we, despite all these great statistics and this great data, we only represent 1% in senior level roles, in corporate boards, in elected official positions. And so it's imperative that we are accelerating, not only closing the gap, but accelerating and then some, but ensuring that we are advocating for ourselves. And if it's not for us that to be in those positions of power and influence and decision making, then how can we get more Latinas at those tables, right? Whether, to Mabel's point, I love it, whether it's your own table that you're creating for other tables that are looking for us, such as corporate boards.
Thank you, Patricia.
Can I just add quickly, because I'm not going to double down on what all the amazing folks have said, but I kind of come from a place where it's a both and, or and both, I'm there I got a seat, I'm in there. But if that is not working, then yes, but we need to be at the table, because that's where a lot of the decisions are made. That's where, the narratives are being created. So we have to have a seat. But if that is not, we have to also ask how the table is oriented, who's on the menu, what's on the menu, those kind of things. And if a whole new one needs to, be made, yes, because then that's also bringing together folks that can help make a change. And so it's really important in this moment to make sure that you have a safe space to also be heard, because to transform conversations, to be ready, to be imaginative, to be fierce, to be bold, to be unconventional, and ultimately be relentless. Thank you.
Yeah, I love all of that. And I think we need to be able to own the table so that we can make sure it's big enough, right? So that we can bring all of the other Latinas that are behind us to the table and make sure that they have a seat as well.
Thank you. Well, the chat and the chat comments and the questions. So we're only going to have time for one of two, and anybody here can take it, because I also want to really make sure that and remind everybody that having these incredible thought leaders here is only to give you a taste of what's possible, because so many of you are change makers and thought leaders in your own right. And sometimes we don't give ourselves the flowers. Our environment doesn't make us feel like we're worthy enough. And absolutely you are. And juntas, honestamente, one Latina at a time, we are going to close this wage gap. And this is why we're having these conversations. So one of the questions that has been brought up and was brought up a few times is, how do you get over the fear of the responsibility when it comes to getting that seat at the table? Beyond imposter syndrome, feeling like one is under a microscope and possibly wanting to fail, because it's a lot of pressure. So who would want to address this question on how to get over the fear of responsibility of getting a seat at the table?
The truth is that the fear never goes away. You just have to make peace with the fear, right? Yo tengo un amiguito aquí que siempre me dice when I'm like, I want to do, no, pero I acknowledge it, I listen, I make peace with it, but then I go inward to understand where it's coming from. I dissect what's mine, what's not, and then I move forward no matter what, right? Like when you feel that fear, right? Fear is a good thing. When you're fearful of something, and you have to be conscious, you can't just jump at everything. It's a signal of growth. It's a signal of an opportunity. It's a signal of something that you can conquer, that you can overcome. So you just have to make peace with that, because that's never going to go away. If anything, I've noticed that my fears change. At first it was, oh my God, we're going to launch a new business and we're going to tank in the first year. Mastered it. Next. Now it's like, oh my God, we have to hire all these new employees. Am I capable of being a CEO? Mastered. Next, right? Oh my God, my daughter's 12 years old. I can't believe it. She just did it. when you realize that fear is just our human minds are conditioned to think in that way, because, you know, whether your input sources, maybe you don't have the right support system, the media, what you give your attention to, your job is to create a support system that believes in you, that supports you, but also make peace with that fear, because it ain't going anywhere. You know? And I think that we can be our own worst enemy, right? We're conditioned, am I not enough? You know, so that's why I say you got to be your own hype man. Nobody loves me more than me.
Same. Amen. Take the next step, even if it's scary. Thank you. I appreciate that. The next question we received is, for those of us who now have a seat at the table, there are many that are in corporate, biotech, different tech, finance. How can we best amplify our voice for development and retention of Latina leaders? Who would like to take this one?
Yeah, I think it starts with a conversation with your supervisor. You know, in terms of seeking professional development, and for example, at ASE, with our Mujeres ASE or any of our leadership training programs, we provide messaging or talking points to be able to support you to have that conversation when you're seeking professional development. And being able to make the connection, I think there's just such a unique value in culturally relevant spaces, in terms of spaces that, whether it's Latina, whether it's LGBTQ plus or other groups that you identify with, I think it's so critical that you find those types of professional development programming that provide you that community and that safe space, and having the conversation with your supervisor. And if the supervisor, if there's other professional development opportunities that are being promoted through your HR department, feel free to go to that contact directly and say, hey, there's this other program that I would like to be added to that list that's aligned with who I am, my identity, and utilizing the data that we've shared, for example, today, to be able to advocate for yourself or other Latinas at your company.
Thank you, Patricia. That also, there's somebody else that had asked about their current company needing DE&I change and advocacy as a role. They've been met with some resistance. And so I think how you meet resistance is with data and with facts. How you meet resistance is by showcasing, you know, if people are resistant, ask them for a trial period so they can show them through the work, because many times a lot of organizations have very strict and set budgets. So it's not as simple as here's the budget to create your own DE&I group. So thank you, Patricia, for addressing that. I have one more question regarding this individual who just left corporate and starting their own entrepreneur journey and wanting to make their own table and bringing their community with them. Any tips and suggestions on how to be a first generation entrepreneur? Because many of us, our parents have never been in corporate. My mom, my mom now knows what I do. My grandmother todavía no tiene idea. You know what I mean? So like, how are you the first? So what advice would you give these entrepreneurs?
Oh, listen, I got to tell you, when my family it talk about raising, you know, it took a village to raise me, and then gather up all our money to send me to school to be a nurse. And when I told them I wanted to leave nursing and become an entrepreneur, they were like, wow, you know, they had no idea that I had insurance for whatever reason, insurance and like a bank, you know, credit union. They were like, you're going to leave all that for the uncertainty from that and go into being an entrepreneur or being a founder. So I definitely understand. And then, so that's not your group that you need to be, you know, you can talk to them, but do not, because they may be giving their fears for themselves onto you. And so when Mabel said about, you know, being your own hype person, absolutely. Like, you may need to start your own little, you know, offshoot of powerful, you know, Latina or, you know, entrepreneurs, whoever it is, that are like, look, I hear you. I feel the same way, because you're going to need that to help keep, you know, pushing yourself forward and continue to ask your why. Why am I here? Why am I doing this? And once you continue to go back to your why, then you'll be able to continue to move forward. It's hard. It's hard, you know, having to push forward, going back to the Macy's and folks that don't look like you, the decision makers, they do not look like you. So you are having to show your data and why we need books that look like us, why we need clothes that look like us, why we need that, you know, all those kind of things. So bringing those numbers are really important. And it is really about finding that group that understands what you're going through and pushing forward but knowing your why, I think, is key.
Oh God, Sonia, that one's so critical because when you think about your why, it gives you also the confidence to be comfortable saying no and walking away when situations don't serve you. There was a question regarding somebody wanting to ask for a raise, but then their manager said, if I give it to you, I have to take it away from someone else. And that kind of environment is probably not a workplace that you want to be in anyway. And so knowing your why and what your value is going to help you in saying, maybe this is not the place for me. And taking those leaps and taking those risks, as so many of you have had in order to be where you are and why you're here sharing your wisdom with everybody. So I just want to take the opportunity again to thank all of you for sharing your amazing energy with us all. Amigas, thank you for choosing to be here with us to observe Latino Eco Pay Day. Todo es mejor en comunidad. And when we face these hard conversations together, we really can ignite change. And so for more incredible resources from our partner at Indeed, head over to our own Latinas on the Table page where we get dropped in the chat. Remember to share your favorite moments or tips using the hashtag Indeed Latinas on the Table and tag We Are Go Latina for reposts, and our partner at Indeed Works on Instagram to share the love. It has been my joy, my honor. And I really do hope that this conversation has inspired you all to break the mold, to not just have a seat at the table, but perhaps open a door for another amiga to sit next to you, and then together own the damn thing too. Thank you so much for our speakers. Thank you to all. Have a very wealthy rest of your year. Thank you. Thank you.